Welcome, everyone. Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're tackling a crop that's got a bit of a reputation for being challenging, but trust me, it is incredibly rewarding, the Brussels sprout. If you've ever thought about growing your own, you're exactly in the right place. We're going to break down the whole process, literally from a tiny little seed all the way to a massive, delicious harvest.
To kick things off, you might actually be surprised to learn that just a single healthy Brussels sprout plant can pump out up to 80 to 100 individual sprouts. I mean, that is a massive return on investment for your garden space, right? But that's only if you give this plant exactly what it needs.
And hey, here's another fascinating little fact for you. Did you know that freezing temperatures actually make Brussels sprouts taste sweeter? I know it sounds totally counterintuitive, but a touch of frost is genuinely the secret ingredient to the best harvest. Later on, we'll uncover exactly why that happens and how you can time your crop perfectly to take advantage of it.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start by meeting the plant, move into soil prep and seedlings, cover transplanting and crop care, tackle pests and disease control, talk about that autumn sweet harvest, and wrap up with some final tips and a quick disclaimer.
All right, Section 1. Meet the Brussels sprout, covering its origins and ideal conditions.
Let's just start by looking at where this completely polarizing vegetable actually comes from and the very specific environment it literally craves to thrive. The plant evolved from early ancestors grown during the Roman era over on the Apennine Peninsula. Fast forward a bit to the year 1200 and we see early cultivation kicking off in Belgium. But it really wasn't until the 16th century that mass production exploded there, which officially gave the Brussels sprout its famous namesake.
Now, to successfully grow these guys today, we really have to respect their biology. You're going to want a neutral to slightly alkaline soil pH, somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5. If your soil is highly acidic, it can actually cause these really unsightly rust spots on your sprouts, and nobody wants that. Temperature-wise, their sweet spot is remarkably cool, just 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. So here's a crucial point. While the plant can absolutely survive freezing cold down to minus 10 degrees, temperatures above 25 degrees Celsius will completely halt sprout formation. Yep, they literally just shut down in the heat.
Moving right along to Section 2, Soil Prep and Seedlings, where we'll be laying the groundwork.
Okay, so now that we know what the plant likes, let's look at how to prep your soil and get those seeds started. To lay down the proper groundwork, you've got to remember that Brussels sprouts are incredibly sensitive to soil exhaustion. Basically, you absolutely must rotate your crops. Good predecessor crops are things like tomatoes, peppers, beans, and peas. These leave the soil nice and loose, and in the case of beans, super rich in nitrogen. On the flip side, do not, and I mean do not, plant them where you previously grew onions or other cabbages. Actually, you should wait at least 4 to 5 years before planting in the exact same spot to avoid shared soil pathogens. Trust me, you don't want to deal with the dreaded clubroot fungus.
When it comes to Brussels sprouts, timing is literally everything. Because this crop requires a massive 165 days to mature, you have to strictly follow this timeline. Step 1. Start your seeds in a nursery or open bed in late April or early May, sowing them about 1.5 to 2 centimeters deep. Step 2, you're going to nurture them there for a 50 to 60-day vegetative period. And then, Step 3, by early June, those robust little seedlings will finally be ready to transplant out into their permanent outdoor home.
Okay, on to Section 3, transplanting and crop care, which is really the crucial growth phase.
So June arrives, and it's time to get those seedlings into the ground and start providing some real meticulous care. This is the longest phase of the whole process, and your consistency here completely dictates your final yield. Now, while your soil does need to be rich and heavily fertilized, you absolutely must avoid this critical beginner mistake. Never ever use fresh manure. If you do, it causes this crazy explosion of rapid leaf growth because of all the excessive nitrogen, but it totally ruins the actual vegetable. You'll end up with these loose, airy little sprouts instead of the firm, tight heads we all want. Always stick to well-rotted compost or slow-release fertilizers instead.
Let's fast forward a bit into the growing season. This is when you need to perform a neat little technique called topping. Topping is just the practice of pinching off the very top buds of the plant about 50 to 60 days before you harvest. Why do we do this? Well, it physically stops the plant from growing taller. That forces it to redirect all of its energy and nutrients into plumping up those sprouts all along the stem, rather than just wasting energy reaching for the sky.
All right, here are your day-to-day care essentials. First off, space them generously. We're talking 60 to 70 centimeters apart, because they absolutely despise being shaded. And here's a fun fact, the plant has surprisingly shallow roots and loses a ton of moisture through its large leaves. Because of this, keeping your soil moisture at about 80 to 90% field capacity is vital. That just means deeply saturated, but not like a muddy swamp. Interestingly enough, using microsprinklers to mimic natural rain is actually way more effective for them than standard drip irrigation, because it cools the leaves and hydrates that shallow root zone perfectly. Oh, and don't forget to hoe and mound up some dirt right around the base of the plant a few weeks after transplanting. These guys get pretty tall and top-heavy, so that extra soil gives them some much-needed physical stability when the wind picks up.
Next up is Section 4, Pests and Disease Control, because we definitely need to talk about protecting your crop.
Unfortunately, all that beautiful, lush green growth makes sprouts an absolute magnet for pests. You're almost certainly going to face a few of these enemies. The white cabbage butterfly lays eggs that hatch into caterpillars, and those guys will literally skeletonize your leaves. The cabbage moth is somehow even worse. Its caterpillars burrow directly right into the forming sprouts and just ruin them from the inside out. You've also got flea beetles shooting holes in young leaves and aphids draining out all the nutrients. So what's the solution? You've got to stay vigilant. Spraying every 2 weeks with a good biological treatment like Bacillus thuringiensis or a safe, approved insecticide is highly recommended to protect all your hard work.
Now, when you are fighting those pests, keep this super practical pro tip in mind. Brussels sprouts have a really thick, waxy coating on their leaves. If you just mix up a spray and toss it on there, the liquid is just going to beat up and roll right off onto the dirt. It's totally useless. Always add an adjuvant or even just a couple drops of everyday liquid soap to your sprays. That breaks the surface tension, lets the treatment actually stick to the leaves, and allows it to do its job.
All right, Section 5, the Autumn Sweet Harvest, aka reaping the rewards.
This is it. We have finally reached the climax of our explainer. Do you remember that question I posed at the very beginning? Why does a freeze make them taste sweeter? Well, when the temperatures drop down to around 0 degrees Celsius, a literal physiological change happens inside the plant. The starches packed inside those little sprouts hydrolyze, which is just a fancy way of saying they turn into sugar. It completely wipes out their natural bitterness, rewarding you with a tender, incredibly sweet, and super nutrient-dense vegetable.
But getting to that sweet, frosty harvest takes exactly this, 165. Yep, that's the average number of days from the moment you sow your seeds to the moment you harvest. That means the tiny seeds you so carefully planted way back in late April or May are finally ready to be picked in late October or November. It is seriously an exercise in patience, but I promise you that late-season reward is entirely worth the wait.
And finally, Section 6, some final tips and our disclaimer.
Let's wrap this up with some final advice on how to actually store all that hard-earned bounty. When you're out there harvesting, you want to look for firm, bright green heads right around the size of a walnut. Always start picking from the bottom of the stalk and work your way up. And for peak freshness, keep them unwashed in a loosely closed plastic bag right in your fridge. They do need a little bit of air to breathe, but stored like that, they're going to stay perfectly crisp for up to 5 days.
Now, before you break ground, please just keep this quick disclaimer in mind. The info in this explainer is meant as general agricultural guidance. Your own cultivation results are probably going to vary a bit based on your local climate, your specific soil conditions, and whatever unique pests are flying around your neighborhood. Always just use your best judgment as you adapt these techniques to your specific gardening environment.
So, here's my final question for you. With 165 days of patience leading up to a massive harvest of those sweet, frost-kissed sprouts, where exactly are you going to plot out your very first Brussels sprout bed? Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. I really hope this roadmap empowers you to get out there, get your hands in the dirt, and cultivate this awesome, delicious crop for yourself. Until next time, happy gardening.